Today, I want to just get in the middle of it and talk about, are people logical with the risks they take and the type of risks? And I want to go over what I think are some hugely misrepresented or misinterpreted studies and ways society has gone over that, and that both people are more logical and less logical than people think people are, and has led to a lot of prejudice, but how this can lead us moving forward to a better society if we understand these logics. But first, I want to go over um, a bunch of studies that have shown that people are risk adverse. So there's a couple different ways these studies have been set up. One is that you could have a chance of winning definitely 2x amount of X amount of money, let's say $100. Or you can have half the time you win nothing, and half the time you win twice the amount of money, $200. On average, they're the same. You could also have a study where you have a chance of not losing anything, or you could have a chance of losing $100 but also gaining $100 half the time. On average, they're the same. You can also look at it with insurance, which is a bit different. But let's say I can just pay you $250, or if you lose $500 worth of money, I can pay you $500 if on average half the times you're losing $500 of money with your bets. This, again, study after study have shown that in general, people are risk adverse. Not always, they're always risk takers, but most people are risk adverse. And they've shown that with insurance programs where they tried with farmers insurance in Ghana, where they offered $250 worth of insurance or direct payment of $250. And then they said this is illogical, and that people, when they're playing games, it's illogical, they don't take so many risks. Well, let's just look at them from more of a point that's not game theory or not math based. We have so much more to lose than just $250 worth of money or more. We have our lives at stake. If I know that I have a safety net and that the worst thing can happen to me won't kill me, I'm going to go for it. If the worst thing that can happen to me still can kill me, I'm not going to go for it. If losing $10 but a chance to earn so much more money means the loss of $10 means I will die, yeah, let me not take that risk. I'm going to probably take a very less risky strategy that makes a lot less payment. And that's what they keep forgetting about in many of these studies. And I'll later go on about how the different types of risk and how people do not understand risks in more depth. So for if you're poor or if you're in a situation that the harm can really spiral out of control, you might not be able to food or you might end up in a really uncomfortable situation, it is logical to go for insurance or just the straight up bets and not take risks. And it's logical just simply because of safety. However, if you're rich, you get into a term where that can be an illogical choice. If everything is fine and dandy in my life, losing some money might not be a big deal, or not a deal at all. Instead, that money I might gain, the extra money I might gain more, might even be more worthwhile because I can invest it and make even more money. But investment can only happen when I am in a safe place. And this means that rich people can take more risks, earn more money, and become even richer. We also have a bias in that we think people are risk adverse, overly risk adverse, because we see rich people that we hear all these stories about rich people that made it big in life and took all the risks they had. However, those people did not have the best. Those people, for every one of those people, there's probably 100 people more that fell for it and end up dying, starving in the streets, literally. So the idea that people are overly risk adverse is kind of silly. We might even be taking too much risks in our life. And this is why people say like you should take a student loan and go to college or all these other things. And yes, there are risks worth it. More worth. It's not. How will we have to be a lot more careful with on houses? The problem more is not that we're too risk adverse, is that we don't understand the risks, and therefore we make bad judgments. We think something is more risky than it is, or something is safer than it is, and that is for several reasons. One reason is we remember a biased sample. What we remember things are big things, emotional things, things in the first and last thing. So our sample is very, very small. We don't remember everything in its entirety. We don't remember the boring little stuff. We remember something, if something bad happens to us, we remember that well, even though we can do the same thing a million times and nothing bad happens. You can have one traumatic event and that can be the only thing you remember, even though you did a million other times and nothing bad happens out of it. In the movie, you can only remember the first and last statement. So if all the boring, minute details that might be important for accurate analysis, forget about them. You'll remember the shocking stuff on the news. Then we have our value system, which leads to bad thing. Values are something taught at a very, very, very young age. Or it's also, some people argue, partly genetic, and it's also taught by a young age by your parents, the culture, so much things, and maybe a little bit genetic. But values might be like, I value good grades because I, for some reason, feel like they're important. Even if they're not important, even getting the best grades won't get me to the next step in life. But I feel for some reason important to my well-being and happiness when they're not. I might think something is dangerous or unsafe because I was taught by it from a young age. I might value something that does not, people value stuff all the time that does not give them happiness or something. And people can learn values and unlearn these values, but these are deep ingrained ideas in our head that bias us into what our goals are. Our goals are to get a good grade, but will that good grade get us a good grade? But our goals might be security and safety, and we might think that uniformity is a value that a lot of people, everyone wants people to be uniform, but is that a really good value? Some people might want to be very wealthy, but is that a good value, or should you just try to be happy? The other thing is we're very good at pattern finding, even when there's no pattern at all. And this can lead to over or underestimate risks a huge amount. There is an example in that people think, when people see random patterns, people think there's a pattern more often than when they see non-random patterns. That's how crazy it is. And what this is, professor, which I'll link the video to, and I'll have sources for everything I'm saying, linked below the video, is that they asked people to make a random string of digits, and then they had a computer generate it. Then people had to guess, and then there's also a trained mathematician guessing. So the trained mathematician had news about it, and they've done this experiment with very long, usually with over 30 strings where you just write down 1 or 0. Simple as that. In longer sequences, it actually is easier, but people tend to spread out the sequence too much. There's too many 1, 0, 1, 0. There's not enough repeats of 1, 1, 1, which, if you think about it, happen all the time, just randomly. There's a random chance you can get 4 ones in a row. But people think that's always a pattern. There's a random chance. So people would always times put in these randoms, would make it less biased by putting more 1s and 0s and having less repeats. The computer wouldn't do that. And people would think the random sequence generated by a computer must have some complicated pattern to it. People have also shown, and then this trained mathematician could almost always predict who was the computer, not unlike the untrained ones, by just looking how many long sequences there were. And the ones with longer sequences usually was the computer. people in general, when they're doing stuff, find patterns in almost anything. And there's been computer randomly generated images on a screen, and people would just black noise, and people would find patterns. Yeah. So when we find patterns, we think we understand the risk, we understand what's involved, when really it could just be due to randomness. Why do we find patterns? Well, evolutionarily, it was useful. I mean, it's better to be safe than cautious, and finding stuff out quickly when something is hunting you might be a lot better than sitting there waiting to figure out the best move against a lion that's hunting you. You need to make quick decisions. Right nowadays, it's not so much useful. It gets less and less when we don't have to run for our lives. All of this leads to biased media coverage, which reinforces this. We remember random things from the biased coverage of what people say. The media and the people in the media remember biased things, so they report it biasly. The media has biased values. The media's so they will report stuff like they'll cover racism as one. They'll cover stories against black people a lot more if it makes a black person look bad than if it makes a white person look bad. Biased coverage. You can also look at sexism and any type of prejudice. Biased coverage and pattern finding we pick up what we think is an interesting story when it might not be that interesting at all. And all of these feed into each other. Biased coverage means we're more likely to find biased coverage with stuff with more patterns, and with biased memories, more likely to make biased patterns. The media informs our values, and vice versa. And we have, again, remember a biased big thing? We remember what we see in the media more. Back and forth. Back and forth. So now it's even more complicated because pattern finding leads to values, this leads to this, but not as much as these two things lead to each other and this thing leads to this. It's all connected. So that's really what we have to be aware of when we're talking about people not taking the right risks or not taking enough. Now, how will we use this knowledge to make ourselves have a less bad society and a more equal and fair society? Well, first, we need to stop blaming people for being too risk adverse. We need to stop blaming people for not lifting themselves off feet, for not taking risks, because we don't know how much they have to lose. We also need to know that people are not logical, so they will not even take risks when it's meant to be risks. Stop blaming people for not taking risks. Beyond not blaming people for not taking risks, we need to make it a safe place for them to take risks. What they found in the study where they gave $250 worth of crop insurance compared to $250 worth of money, the people that got $250 crop insurance were more likely to take more risks after they got insurance because they felt safer. They started acting more like they were rich once they got this insurance. So yes, giving away insurance is actually an excellent way to help people. We need more safety nets so people feel comfortable taking it instead of just giving people out incentives. This is a little bit why I'm against universal basic income or a lot of other ones that try to talk about how great college or something is. Great, we have all these things talking about how great something is, or we'll give them benefits if they join this program. But if they're not feel safe, like they don't feel like they still can go in debt, that's not going to help. We need to focus more on the low end of making sure people don't starve, people can go to college without the risks of starving and stuff. Less on, this will open up great opportunities for you, in my opinion. Yeah, and then also by scapegoating poor people, you put responsibility on them and we make them feel bad. The other thing is, We need to teach people to more accurately assess risks and randomness. So, how do we do that? Well, I might say we have to find examples from a young age, and we need to teach them. We have to show people are biased by doing little home experiments with psychology, where we have people remember stuff and we show that their memory was biased, or we have them try to find. We show them in statistics that with real examples in the classroom stuff, that stuff can just randomly pop up. We have to show them real world examples of bias in the covers of media, or how they talk about friends. We need to make people more aware of risks. And when we talk about people engaging in legit risky behavior, we need to present it in a logical way. The way that a lot of education has been presented is that we talk only about how bad it is or how good it is. We don't talk about it in a neutral, more complex standpoint, and we say unknowns. We need to also just get people more comfortable instead of with unknowns. For example, why does abstinence-only education not work? Well, it sounds so ridiculous that no one believes in it. When I give you a model that you can believe in, that's not too scary, more people are likely to believe on both ends. But when you have an abstinence-only one, there are people that believe in it violently. And that leads to violent opposition from it. And then you have the people that just realize it's not real and don't believe in it and don't take any of the risk precaution. Whenever you present just all the risks and make it sound scary or go to extreme, you have the people who generate the violent opposition based on values, and you have the people on the other end that just don't take it seriously anymore. We need a fact-based approach. We need to challenge your own values. Does getting good grades really make you more happy? Does doing this really make you more happy? But even with that, when we look at people and we say they're not taking enough risk, we have to ask them, do we know what risks there are in their life? For example, I might not want to go to a party. You might be like, why? The party might be wonderful. You might meet the love of your life. You might have friends. You might have a good time. Well, there might be something to me that you don't realize. Maybe the reason why I don't want to go to a party is because there's a risk that you can't understand, that I understand, such as I could get sensory overload and the next day just be feeling sick and unable to do anything. I could get lost at a party because I get easily lost when I'm overloaded, like really legit just lost or wandering. I could be somebody that had a traumatic event, and that event just got exaggerated, or it's a traumatic event that could happen again because of their identity. We're not good at estimating trauma. A person might be afraid to walk in a public neighborhood, and they might have a legit reason that you do not understand. Do not look at people avoiding risk and think you know that they're avoiding risk too much. Instead, try to make the place comfortable for them, and that's how we can move forward, reassessing their values, trying to minimize risk in the first place, instead of trying to make people feel comfortable with the risk. Any therapy just trying to get people to be comfortable with taking risk is going to be biased, because it's going to lead to people suppressing what they really need to say about how they feel uncomfortable. And the last one is, besides values, understanding the risks, is just please be more open-minded. Thank you very much. And I'll link to studies below.